When we think of pirates, we imagine wild adventures, buried treasure, freedom on the open sea, and fierce battles against the odds. The word pirate has become romanticized, cloaked in myths, stories, and cinematic legends. But behind the legends lies a grim, bloody reality that most people would rather ignore. Because for the vast majority of pirates, their story didn't end with gold or glory. It ended in chains, torture, and death. This is what really happened when pirates got caught, and it's not a tale for the faint of heart. Pirates lived outside the law. They attacked merchant ships, stole goods, and slaughtered crews. That made them enemies of every civilized nation. England, Spain, France, the Dutch Republic, it didn't matter. Pirates were considered outlaws of the sea, hostis humani generis, enemies of all mankind. And when they were captured, they were treated not just as criminals, but as monsters. The law was designed to be unforgiving, and the punishments were meant to terrify anyone even thinking about turning pirate. Capture could come swiftly or unexpectedly. Sometimes pirates were hunted by naval warships specifically sent to find them. These warships were faster, heavier, and better armed. Sometimes pirates were betrayed by former comrades, jealous rivals, or even desperate locals hoping for a reward. Other times they simply ran out of luck. A damaged ship, a miscalculation, or even a sudden storm could leave them stranded and vulnerable. And once they were caught, the nightmare began. Pirates were usually chained in irons and thrown into the filthiest part of the ship, the brig, or even the bilge. No light, barely any food or water, and the stench of rot and rats. They could remain in these conditions for weeks while being transported to port. Some captains whipped or beat them during the voyage. Others paraded them around like trophies, letting the crew spit on them or laugh as they suffered. By the time they reached land, many were already sick or half dead. But that was just the beginning. Once on land, pirates faced trial, and these trials were designed less to determine guilt, which was almost always assumed, and more to humiliate, terrify, and condemn. Most trials took place in colonial ports like Port Royal, Jamaica, Nassau, Bahamas, or Boston, Massachusetts. The courtroom was packed. Locals came to watch like it was theater, and the pirates were paraded in, filthy and broken, surrounded by guards, facing a judge who likely saw them as nothing more than scum. They were often denied proper defense. Some were barely literate. Many didn't even understand the legal proceedings. Witnesses were brought in to describe their crimes, usually exaggerated or laced with patriotic fury. And while the trial technically followed legal procedure, the outcome was almost always the same: guilty. Sentencing was swift, and the punishment, death, by hanging. But it wasn't a quick or painless death. Pirates weren't just hanged. They were executed in ways meant to horrify. One of the most infamous locations was Execution Dock in London. There, pirates were taken down the River Thames in chains, past jeering crowds, and hanged at low tide. Why low tide? Because the bodies would remain hanging until the tide came in and covered them 3 times, a ritual meant to symbolize complete damnation. Families were not allowed to retrieve the bodies. They were left to rot, picked apart by birds, a warning to others. And that's if you were lucky. Some pirates were hanged in cages, gibbeted. After death, their corpses were placed in iron cages and hung along the coast. The wind would rock their decaying bodies for weeks or months. In some cases, the gibbeted pirate was still alive when placed in the cage, left to die slowly of exposure, dehydration, and madness. Sailors and children would see these grotesque figures as they entered the harbor, a rotting pirate, swinging in the wind with crows pecking at his eyes. That was the point: terror. Torture was not uncommon. Some pirates, especially if they were suspected of hiding treasure or being leaders, were tortured before execution. Beatings, thumbscrews, burning, or even mutilation. Captains were often singled out for harsher treatment, and those who had once been legitimate privateers, working under a government's letter of marque, were often punished even more brutally, seen as traitors. In Spanish territories, the punishment could even be worse. The Spanish Inquisition dealt with pirates as heretics and enemies of God. Torture chambers, branding, and burning at the stake were all used. In some cases, captured pirates were sent to galley ships, condemned to row for years, shackled to benches, whipped constantly, barely fed, often dying at their oars. A slow, miserable death by exhaustion and disease. Not all pirates died, though. Some turned informants. If a pirate could offer valuable information about hidden treasure, secret pirate havens, or major pirate leaders, they might be spared or given a lighter sentence. But that meant betraying their crew, their code, and their identity. It meant becoming the very thing they once fought against. And even then, their fate wasn't secure. Many were still executed after they gave up everything they knew. Governments used them, then discarded them. A few received pardons. England, in particular, occasionally offered pardons to pirates willing to retire, but these were rare and conditional. One false move, and the pardon was revoked. Some pirates accepted a pardon and tried to live a normal life, only to be dragged back into piracy out of desperation or boredom. Those caught a second time were almost always hanged without trial. Women who turned pirate faced unique horrors. Though fewer in number, female pirates like Anne Bonny and Mary Read became legends. But when caught, they were treated with extreme suspicion and disgust. If pregnant, they were sometimes spared temporarily, the infamous pleading the belly. But after the child was born, the sentence was carried out. If not pregnant, they were hanged just like the men, often with even more public outrage. Women who defied gender roles and laws were considered doubly dangerous. And what of the pirate code, the legendary honor among thieves? In reality, it often broke down under pressure. Pirates betrayed each other. Some testified against their captains. Others blamed crewmates to save themselves. Under torture, men told whatever their captors wanted to hear. There was no glory in the courtroom, and no brotherhood on the gallows, only fear. The execution of a pirate was a public event. Bells rang, crowds gathered, vendors sold food and drinks. Children sat on their fathers' shoulders to get a better view. And the pirate, dirty, thin, sometimes weeping or cursing, would be led to the scaffold. Some gave defiant speeches. Others begged for mercy. The noose would be placed around their neck, the trapdoor would open, and the body would fall. Sometimes the rope broke. Sometimes the neck didn't snap, and the pirate died slowly, choking and kicking. The crowd would cheer or gasp, but rarely look away. The bodies were often dissected by doctors or left to rot in public. Some were displayed on long poles near ports or roads. The message was clear. This is what happens when you defy the crown, when you steal from the empire, when you live like a pirate. So the next time someone says they wish they were a pirate, that they'd love the freedom and the treasure, remember this: most pirates didn't die in battle. They didn't retire rich. They didn't find buried gold or live on tropical islands. Most were caught, chained, humiliated, tortured, and executed. Their stories ended not with a bang, but with a rope, a curse, and a slow swinging death over cold, muddy water. The romantic image of piracy was built long after the pirates were dead. The truth is far darker, far crueler, and far more human. It is the story of desperate men and women who gambled everything against the most powerful empires in history and lost. Because when pirates got caught, the adventure ended and the horror began.